Good afternoon. Welcome to all on behalf of INHAF Habitat Forum in the 76th webinar on Rethinking Cities series entitled ESG Imaginaries to Make Cities Work, Mobility and Infrastructure. Our partner in this event is Environmental Support Group Trust ESG. Today's event is the third of the previous two sessions on waste and governance and challenges of securing urban commons. The webinar series is an integral part of and feeds into the initiative INHAF launched in 2020 called Tiwari, Citizen Urban Initiative during the initial period of the pandemic. It is a multidisciplinary societal effort spearheaded by some of the leading urban and related professionals, development thinkers, and practitioners to work on a blueprint on country's response to the complex urban challenge in a way that ensures productive, inclusive, sustainable, and livable cities towards an equitable and harmonious society. Some of the tasks of the initiative include reassessing India's urban challenge, rethinking Indian cities, and reformulating the response in the context of national development challenges. Many of us did not need COVID-19 to realize that India's urban systems are faltering and our cities are not in good health in many respects, be that environment or water or mobility, and of course urban governance. It is a seemingly endless list, depending on where one starts and what are the vantage point is. One of the fallouts of COVID-19 crisis is the sharp focus on the urban informal sector has surfaced. The country will have to see that with nearly 90% of the labor force in the informal economy, their conditions of working, their access to various survival infrastructure, housing and mobility must change. With the cities contributing to more than 65% of national GDP already, and urban population growth estimates suggesting 820 million people in the cities by 2050, almost doubling of the current urban population in 30 more years, India could ill afford the underperformance in addressing this complex urban challenge. With all this, cities will need to be rethought and reorganized. Changing all this is no small challenge, even if COVID-19 shock leaves us with a new mindset and fresh resolve to pursue change. The ongoing webinars are seen as opening the much needed societal dialogue on how we handle urbanization process and develop cities so that they remain the engines of economic growth without their exploitative instinct and damaging threats such as carbon footprints. The goal is to aim for economically productive, socially just, politically participatory, environmentally sustainable, and culturally vibrant cities. The webinar series started in June 2020. We have already completed 75 webinars on different themes. This is the 76th one. Like the earlier ones, we have an eminent panel of experts to deliver it in today's event. Without taking any further time, I would now request the anchors, Mr. Leo Saldanha and Ms. Bhargavi S of Environmental Support Group to kindly initiate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonic sir. My name is Anirudh and I work as a research associate at ESG. I'll be filling in for Bhargavi for this introductory session and she will be joining us shortly for the presentation. I've been part of the ESG team for the past 6 months and I've worked on the few ongoing projects at ESG. A very warm welcome to everybody present here for the third webinar of ESG INHAF webinar series of ESG Imaginaries to Make Cities Work. We are proud to share that ESG turns 25.
Can you just speak louder, please? We are not able to hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Or come closer to the microphone.
Am I audible now?
You are audible, but it could be better.
Is this better?
No, it's the same, but we can hear you, but we have to strain to hear you.
Okay. I hope this is better.
Go ahead.
Speak a little louder, maybe.
Yeah. So a very warm welcome to everybody present here for the third webinar of ESG INHAF webinar series of ESG Imaginaries to Make Cities Work. We are proud to share that ESG turns 25 this year, and we are very thankful to Mr. Kirti Shah and everybody at INHAF for giving us this opportunity to present ESG's work over the years. The topic for today is mobility and infrastructure. Just giving a brief introduction to today's topic, when we think of development of cities, we need to think about the ease of mobility within the city. Unfortunately, when we think of ease of mobility, we think about widening of roads, building elevated corridors, and other such infrastructure, which tends to cater to the needs of a certain class of society. Basic necessities such as safe and accessible footpaths, safe pedestrian crossings, pothole-free roads, and development of affordable public transport systems easily accessible to all are unfortunately ignored by the state. Bangalore was once a paradise for cyclists and pedestrians, but the current situation is quite the opposite. More and more funding is being utilized for projects such as the extension of the Nammo Metro project to the airport, which again provides ease of transportation to a certain class of people, whereas nothing is being done to improve the condition of the BMTC, which caters to a higher number of users. ESG has questioned and tried to address majority of these issues to ensure accessibility to differently able, the elderly, the underprivileged, and others who are generally ignored in the planning of infrastructure projects in the city. To name a few, ESG has worked on resolving issues pertaining to the elevated corridors, the expansion of roads within the city, and is currently working on the accessibility study for the Nammo Metro project, and also questioning the construction of the peripheral ring road. I would like to give a quick introduction to the four discussants for today's session before handing it over to Leo and Bhargavi, who will be presenting ESG's work over the years. I would like to welcome Mr. Paul Barter. He's a consultant, researcher, trainer, writer, and podcaster, best known for his parking policy expertise. He has also researched policy and training strength on international comparisons of urban transport, travel demand management, and public transport regulation. He has written extensively on parking policy and provided insight to various metropolitan governments as a consultant to international organizations such as the World Bank and GIZ. Since 2000, Paul is taught at the National University of Singapore, mostly in the LKY School of Public Policy as an assistant professor, and since 2012 as an adjunct associate professor. Next, I would like to welcome Professor Geetam Tiwari. She is head Transportation Research and Injury Prevention Center and MOUD Chair Professor for Transport Planning and at the Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Delhi. She has been Adler Bretska Guest Professor for Sustainable Urban Transport at the Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden, from 2007 to 2010. She has been working in the area of traffic and transport planning and traffic safety, focusing on pedestrians, bicycles, and bus systems. She heads the WHO Collaborating Center on Safety Technologies at TRIP Center, IIT Delhi. She is also the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Injury Control and Safety Promotion since 2009. Next, I'd like to welcome Professor Mohan Rao. He was still recently a professor at the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, School of Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. A medical doctor specialized in public health. He has written extensively on health and population policy and on the history and politics of health and family planning. He is the author of From Population Control to Reproductive Health, Malthusian Arithmetic, and has edited Disinvesting in Health, the World Bank's Health Prescriptions, and The Unearned Scream, Reproductive Health and Women's Lives in India. He has edited with Sarah Sexton of Corner House, UK, the volume Markets and Malthus, Population, Gender and Health in Neoliberal Times. With Sarah Hodges, he has edited Public Health and Private Wealth, Stem Cells, Surrogacy, and Other Strategic Bodies. His latest work is the edited volume of the Lineaments of Population Policy in India, Women and Family Planning. He has been a member of the National Population Commission and several working groups of the National Rural Health Mission of the Government of India. He has worked on the committee established by the National Human Rights Commission to examine the two-child norm in population policy. He is on the executive committee of the Center for Women's Development Studies. He is also actively involved in the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan. He is also a referee for essays and books for leading journals and publishing houses and is on the editorial board of the Indian Journal of General Studies, the Journal of Social Policy, and the online journal Social Medicine. He is currently an independent researcher based in Bangalore. Next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Anjum Pervez, who is the current managing director of the Bangalore Metro Rail Corporation Limited. He has held several posts in the government of Karnataka, such as the Principal Secretary for Urban Development and the Managing Director of the BMTC as well. So I would like to welcome all the 4 discussants for this webinar series, and a huge thanks to all the discussants for taking time and agreeing to be a part of this webinar. I would also like to thank everyone at INHAF and my colleagues at ESG for organizing this webinar. Now over to Leo, who will be taking this forward.
Yeah, thank you, Anirudh, and thank you for introducing all our discussants. Each of them has made enormous amounts of contribution in advancing mobility and appropriate transport systems in many parts of the world. And in particular, Mr. Pervez will be also, one who is speaking from within the system, while the rest of us are speaking from our own perches outside the system. So I'm hoping that this will be a very interesting conversation, and also one which will throw light on what are the challenges of guaranteeing mobility for all, and the challenges of making sure appropriate transport is not limited to just motorization. So on that note, if you can please share the slides, then we can start. Yeah, thank you. Please hold the front, the main slide, the first one. This is actually a picture which Rashid Kappan, a leading journalist from this part of the world, has shared online. And I guess it presents the challenges of guaranteeing mobility as well as appropriate infrastructure. What you see is actually a strip which is meant to be for cyclists in the eastern part of Bangalore. And yet you can see that it is all aptly being taken over by motorcycles. So in effect, it presents one form of challenge that is almost everywhere, not just in the city of Bangalore where I am, but in almost every city across India. It apparently seems that we have become a country which is so given to privileging the motor vehicle that we have completely forgotten that the first act of mobility starts with walking. And perhaps the most appropriate form of mobility, which doesn't damage anything, is cycling. And both are obviously now challenged by even not having sufficient space, and their right to be mobile on the public streets is almost marginalized to such an extent that it becomes a death wish to cycle or to walk on our streets today. So I really feel that this is the kind of experience each one of us has, especially in India, in any city. Rarely do you find cities which have argued and ensured that to be mobile is not to be in a car, but that to be mobile is your capacity to feel healthy, safe, free, and secure by walking, by cycling, and perhaps taking the public transport, say the bus-based transport or any other mass transit system. Yeah, can you have the next slide, please? Yeah, I'll invite Bhargavi to take over this slide, and then I'll come to the next.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. Thank you, Anirudh, and thanks, everybody. So I guess most cities have seen this phenomena of widening their roads. In Bangalore, it had started sometime in the mid-2000s when trees were being felled, and when we questioned why trees were being felled, we realized that most of Bangalore roads were on the list of being widened. While we shared the story of tree felling last week, when we got a little deeper into why roads were being felled, it was obviously because of the increasing amount of traffic in Bangalore, and some originally 500 roads were marked for road widening. we conducted several workshops across the city. We brought people together to co-create solutions where we did find ways by which we could explain to the decision makers as to why road widening was not really essential and how alternatives could be explored. But despite that, many houses were marked for road widening, and the road widening project also came with this uh, provision of a very unjust provision. I could say it was something called the transfer of development right. So every house which was going to be taken for road widening, a part of the house which was going to be taken was offered something called the TDR, and it was not offered any compensation otherwise. The TDR consisted of a slip of paper which said that the house owner could build 2 floors or 3 floors based on the area where the house was located. That didn't mean it came with any kind of a loan facility or financial facility. And in many homes where the roads were marked for road widening, the homes were as it is very small. They were all either 30, 50 sites, or some shops were even smaller. And if half of it was going, there was very little left for those people. And in most of the roads that were marked for road widening, it was the street vendors who were going to pay the price for it, because obviously they would have to move out from there, because after road widening, what was left eventually in those roads where it did manage to get widened was footpaths which are hardly 3 feet in width. And obviously street vendors can't sit there, hawkers can't move around, and all kinds of non-motorized transport was removed from those areas. This is something that we anticipated in a project like this, and we mobilized communities across the city, particularly a road called the Avenue Road, which is where the Bangalore city started growing. That is where the heart of all the trade and business takes place, where a variety of trading communities live. They do business, and there's also a lot of culture and tradition that happens out there. So this Avenue Road was seen as a connecting piece from North Bangalore to South Bangalore, and the proposal was, if Avenue Road is widened, it will be an easy access all the way to the airport. So if we understand how Bangalore is a radial city, and there are right now just about 2 or 3 roads that connect the Bangalore North to the Bangalore South. We already have a half a peripheral road, which I will talk about soon. In addition to it, a bunch of peripheral roads are also proposed. So the administration obviously thought that widening of roads is the solution to this. So that was when we brought a lot of people together. There were several protests, and I can imagine every street corner, every major junction of the city where there was a protest in the city from 2008 to 2011 or so. But somewhere halfway through all those protests, we had to go to the court, file a petition, and the petition itself was very well drafted, explaining all those things that Anirudh just explained about how widening of roads would take away access to pedestrians, to cyclists, to all non-motorized transport. But somehow the court, initially some of the interim judgments were in favor of not widening, because it did say that some of the provisions of the Town and Country Planning Act has to be abided by. But eventually the case got dismissed for a very trivial reason. And some of the roads did get managed to widen, but most roads got saved from this widening. The importance of this was people got to know why such a project was not good for the city, and they came together. And since then, many groups, many organizations, we brought in people who worked on disability, on gender, on LGBTQ rights, on children's rights, on women's rights. Everybody came together for this challenge, and we worked together with the decision makers to ensure roads are not widened, and instead pedestrian paths are provided, footpaths are strengthened, cycling paths are provided. But till now, most of the solutions that have come out have been very tokenistic and not really providing access to the vulnerable and the marginalized communities. So I will stop there and we could go to the next story. Over to you, Leo.
This brings me to the major infrastructure project, which was advanced actually in the mid-90s. That's when I was also interacting with Paul Barter, who used to run this forum called SUSTRAN, Sustainable Transport Network. And we used to have lots of meetings across Southeast Asia and South Asia in advancing future of urban centers that did not require mega infrastructure. And I'm reminded by a study that was done by Ben Flyberg, Mega Projects and Risk it is called, wherein the argument was that after studying more than 100 projects globally, Ben Flyberg and two of his colleagues were all major builders of mega projects, came to the conclusion that they don't really attend to either mobility or the public transportation demands. In fact, they are, as they put it in their subscript, an anatomy of political ambition. So in other words, mega projects were projected as a statement from a political perspective, usually a fairly powerful politician who wants to leave his imprint on the sands of time, if I were to put it that way. The metaphor of sands of time is very telling because in 50 years' time, we'll all forget him. But the fact that the kind of changes that they bring about in the overall form and structure of a city will have irreversible consequences. So one needs to make a very prudent decision. And about that time in Delhi, Professor Geetam Tiwari is here. She was battling it out despite the support of Sheila Dikshit at that time, who was then the Chief Minister of Delhi, was in support of the bus rapid transit system. The entire mass media was railed against her. And Geetam was designing the BRT and did an incredible job trying to say that, we can actually have public transit systems which are low cost, high accessibility, and easily maintainable. And there is no discriminatory inclusivity where, everyone can access it. Those were the arguments I recall. And I also remember the arguments against the idea with the kind of massive jams that were shown on TV repeatedly to claim that this is how it is going to be in future. So in the backdrop of that, in the mid-90s, Bangalore had something called the Elevated Light Rail Transit System as a proposal. At that time, I was part of a group called Civic, and we actually organized the first ever public hearing on an infrastructure project here. And that was not done as a statutory thing. And the outcome of that very, very detailed and very meaningful exchange between the proponents and various discussants, including the international corporations backing it, Vijay Mallya's project it was. For those who don't know, Vijay Mallya is the liquor baron who is now run away from the country because he's looted and there's an extradition notice on him. He's in London now. The project was shelved. That's when the Bangalore Metro project was promoted. And the basic argument is you need to have a rail-based transport system to attend to the future demands of the city. Now, nobody had any quarrel with the fact that the city which had which had grown from a population of about 2.5 million in the early 70s to almost 4.5 million by the early 90s, was going to have a very big demand on transport. But the questions that were posed were of the nature that it gave rail-based transit system as the only option available and dismissing all other options. So that basically created a lot of contestations on how do you attend to this type of decision-making process where the power is so heavily vested in the government, and particularly a government which is unlikely to listen to the public. And Bhargavi mentioned the Town and Country Planning Act. Our argument was, even if you follow ritually the procedure as contained in the Town and Country Planning Act, maybe the outcome could be different. Maybe we'll have a metro after all, but at least it will be our metro. And it won't be a metro that has been imposed on us. Or it could be a possibility that we might say, you know what, the metro seems like a good idea, but it will not meet the city's travel demands. And so let's try other options. So a mix of options were available, like, trying to advance non-motorized transport, such as what the NUTP, National Urban Transport Policy, also promoted in the 2000s. For us, we were not stranger to that. I mean, I grew up in a Bangalore which was full of tongas. And we were wondering, I mean, now does it need a central policy to tell us to use that power? We also grew up in a city where you could cycle and walk from anywhere to anywhere else. It was not something that you had to put out there as an infrastructure so that you could cycle and walk. That was a given mode of transport. In fact, most of us walked mostly, and very few times took the bus. But the scale of the city was expanding, and so the metro became, according to the government, an imminent project. But interestingly, the project was actually pushed through in 2005 when the DPR was presented on 31st of March. Then Chief Minister received the DPR from Mr. Sridharan from Delhi Metro and approved it the next day. And coincidentally, it happened to be April Fool's Day. Now, 20 years later, when we look back at that decision that a Chief Minister takes without really any consultation with the wide public, I recall how many times there were protests from shopkeepers, from residents, when the alignments were proposed. They just didn't know. They were saying, but why here? Why not there? Why can't it go underground? In fact, there was a jingle called Metro Go Underground, which was produced by Ricky Cage, who recently won the Grammy Award and who's going to perform in the UN General Assembly tomorrow. And we had protests everywhere. And the basic idea was, look, we said we can have the metro, but under other ways to have the metro. So those protests eventually ended up again in court. And interestingly, a very exemplary judgment came out of the High Court of Karnataka, where the then Chief Justice Kehar was heading the bench, said, okay, fine, the phase 1 of the metro is already underway. There's not much we can do to correct that, but let's not repeat the mistakes in phase 2. And the order basically says that the provisions in the Town and Country Planning Act, which require that the public are informed not once, twice, thrice, but 4 times, and their views are taken in the proposal of an idea, in the evolution of the scheme, in confirming the budget, and finally in implementing the project plan. Now, there's not a single project across the country, at least in the state of Karnataka, which has complied with this requirement. And the court was very wary about what future metropolises will have if this is how infrastructure is developed. And so wrote down in the order that the officials, and I'm aware Mr. Anjum Pervez would be one official who could be affected by that order, that the officials will be personally held accountable for non-compliance with the planning provisions. So it's not like the Indian planning provisions were archaic. For the 1960s, the Town and Country Planning Act was what it was. At that time, progressive. We could have evolved on it, built on it, changed it to, modified it to accommodate the, the intense urbanization that was taking place. But unfortunately, that was not the case. And on the left side of your screen, you would see at the bottom, the All Saints Church garden with people standing in front of it. Also the center bottom photograph with the kids in it. And I must credit here Mr. Pervez's extraordinary involvement and also his predecessor, Mr. Ajay Seth, who was then the MD. We took it up and said, when the metro alignment was fixed, it was not meant to come inside the church. And the church is 150 years old. And if you put the church through, if you put the metro underground and put a station on top, it would destroy that grove, which had extraordinary biodiversity, even for its small size. And it was in the middle of the city. So what is the value of living heritage? What is the value of wonderful architecture? The church is distinctive. There's no other such construction anywhere in the country. So do we compromise the memories of our cities? Do we just let go of them? Don't we? I mean, isn't there any consideration to those aspects? Now, one thing that had actually happened during the conceptualization of phase 1 of the metro was that it was actually supposed to go at grade or on an elevated track through a very precious lung space of the city called Kaban Park, which is right in the center of the city. And I recall then Chief Secretary Mr. Chiranjeev Singh took it upon himself to convince the government that if at all you want to bring it there, you must take it underground. And that's where it is now. Now, the basic argument here is that the metro becomes the main mode of public transport investment across a radial city. And you can see from the map that is going all the way to the airport. The cost is, I don't know, Mr. Pervez will tell us, 16,000 crores for the phase one, maybe 30,000 crores for the phase two, and overall, I think if all the phases are put together, maybe 100,000 crores, which is a lot of money. Now, so the real problem with such conceptualization is there is no turning back, and the loans. And today, I think the metro accommodates about 4.5 commuter trips, whereas the buses, which are not being heavily invested in, there are maybe about 1,600 buses in the city. They accommodate about 4 million trips every day. So there's a huge disparity in terms of investment in the bus-based transit system and the metro. Metro gets a lot of public investment and a lot of support. But the news I want to share, the happy news, is that we actually saved All Saints Church. And that's because Mr. Pervez was considerate enough to respond to an intervention by the European Investment Bank. We used a complaints mechanism there, and they responded by setting up a sort of a arbitration process, informal arbitration process. And we spoke, and there's so many detailed conversations we had with the top, the leadership of the metro and the impacted community, that it showed that it is possible to make amendments. We have saved the church, and the people are going to church, and I hope that station will also be called All Saints Church Station. The point is, if we can do it at a scale like that, is it impossible for us to do it at a wider scale, that we can have a deeply democratic process where people feel that they have been involved in decision making about the transformation of their urban, of their city? Because after all, the city is where most of us have grown up or live and die, and our memories are associated with the spaces that are there. So why is it that we are so reticent to engaging with the implications of transformation? Nobody is against transformation, but why are we not open to engagement with diverse views on transformation? That's basically the idea, and in some cases we are quite happily successful. Yeah, next one, please. Yeah, Bhargavi.
Yeah. So while infrastructure projects started in a big way in 2000s and mid 2000s inside the city, on the peripheral part of the city was proposed this mega infrastructure, which was an expressway that proposed to connect Bangalore to the heritage city of Mysore. And the promise was that anybody an hour or so. Now it takes about 2.5 hours, 3 hours on the existing state highway. And there are also railway lines that carry about 2 or 3 trains, or 4 trains perhaps, all the way from Mysore to Bangalore. But despite that, and the state highway has been widened many, many times. And today it is, I think, a 8-lane highway that is, in fact, construction is ongoing there. It has consistently been widened, and it's pretty good. But despite that, there was this proposal that there will be an expressway. And the expressway was not just an expressway, it was also planned along with townships all along the way in the 4 towns of Chenpatna, Ramnagara, Mandya, and Madur, where they planned a silk city, a knowledge city, and a couple of other cities. The whole idea was people would travel by this expressway in their fancy cars, and there will be these townships where there will be business centers, residential colonies, gated communities where they would cut deals and play and socialize and party and head back within a few minutes into their homes. So when a mega project like this is proposed, and all along Mysore and Bangalore are agrarian communities, and these are areas which are irrigated by the Kaveri River. It is largely paddy growing. Some places it is ragi and a variety of fruits, vegetables. But despite that, the way the public hearings were held was very shocking at that point of time. The first of the public hearings was held in Bangalore, the picture that you see on the left. And most people who represented the civil society were sitting right in front, and the process of public hearing was again very bizarre and nightmarish when I think about it, because everybody who wanted to speak had to take a token, and then you had to wait for your token to be called. And even before any of the tokens were called, you see the line of policemen who came right in front. They literally lifted people off their chairs even before the public hearing started, put them into a police van, and kept them in the police station all day till the public hearing was over. And the entire hall was filled with people who sang that they wanted the expressway. So this was how the public hearing was conducted across all the 4 or 5 towns and cities where this road passed through. And this project landed up in a whole lot of trouble because most of the farmers were not willing to part with their land, obviously because this is agricultural land. And we conducted a survey of 70 odd villages and more, actually 170 villages. Where we understood how the process was not communicated. The project had no information at the household level. Nobody ever knew what was going to happen. It just that one fine day, a bulldozer came to bulldoze a part of their land. And many people lost their homes, many people lost their place of livelihood where they practice agriculture and livestock rearing. A whole lot of lakes had been in the alignment. And then there were also a lot of the commons, the grazing pastures of all these towns and villages, which were also part of this. And the alignment of the BMIC highway also kept changing as per the whims and fancies of people who could negotiate and get their land listed off the alignment. And the project had taken way too much land than it actually required. It ran into a whole lot of court cases, not just at the High Court level, but also at the Supreme Court level. And today only a part of the road is done. That is, the peripheral part is done. It's like a half moon that surrounds Bangalore on the southern side. And it is tolled expressway. Even this peripheral road, it is very expensive. It has a whole lot of rules and regulations of what kind of vehicles can go, not go. And the sad part is, you see on that road on either side are farms. For these farm people, if they have to access their land or if they have to take their animals for grazing, they obviously can't cross this road. And the path that has been provided for them is very narrow and way far away from where they live. So they have to walk that extra 10 miles or 5 miles just to get that access to cross the road. And this road also runs along the Badamanamvarti Kaval forest, which is the forest adjacent to southern Bangalore, which is home to leopards. Which is also part of the elephant corridor in the region. There have been a lot of elephant entry into this place, a lot of conflict with the farmers and their crops, which have got destroyed by the elephants. They've also come onto the road. There have been leopard deaths. And only this part of the road is done. The main expressway part never got done so far. And this road has also made way for a whole lot of crime in the night. And it is being used by the rich and the elite who have all their fancy bikes to go on bike races and car races. I live very close to this BMIC road, and in the night you can hear the booming noise of the race bikes going up and down this road here. So this was how an expressway was planned. And you see the pictures of protests where it was a farming community that came onto the streets. And somewhat, in relation to this, there are many other highways and expressways that have been built across the country. You see the highway between Pune and Mumbai and Delhi and other places. So based on all these stories, there's actually a very nice film called Puttakana Highway made by a filmmaker called B. Suresha here. It narrates a story of exactly what happens to rural communities. And I would urge everybody to watch that. And we've used that film in many, many of our classes when we talk about infrastructure and mobility, particularly, city town related mobility. So this is one more such story. And many of the battles are still ongoing in the Supreme Court of this particular road. Although it does serve to some extent the truck traffic that originally used to come into Bangalore, it now moves across this road to go to Chennai and go to Pune and other places. I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I also want to say that the Bangalore-Mysore corridor that Bhargavi mentioned, spoke of just now, is also one of the most litigated projects in post-colonial India. And that is because the framework agreement, which was originally secretive, had been fudged, and the land required was changed from what was initially 18,000 acres to 28,000 acres. So the lack of transparency and accountability was one of the major features of its conception. And it was also built on the build, own, operate, and transfer model, which, as Bhargavi said, has been used as a prototype across India. And apart from the corruption, the fact that we have colonial laws such as the Land Acquisition Act, which is still being used, or the Karnataka Industrial Area Development Board Act in Karnataka, and similar acts across the country, provide the government extraordinary emergency powers to snatch away land, which have been farmed for hundreds of years. And farmers are left with no device but to end up in court or organize protests and get thrashed. So I know farmers who have been litigating from 2000 and have been reduced to paupers. So when we talk about projects like this, the way the city and the city infrastructure is arrogated as if it's the future and nothing should come in its way. And Puttakan Highway, as Bhargavi mentioned, is an excellent representation of how this can destroy lives and livelihoods of millions. And that is apparently the situation across the country now today with the major infrastructure projects. Now, the point is that can we find a humane way to build necessary infrastructure? And before you see what is called the Steel Flyover, which is another successful campaign run by people across Bangalore, and eventually led to the formation of a platform called Citizens for Bengaluru, in which basically the argument was by the city government that you needed to have a steel flyover to relieve the pressure on time of those who work in the central business district, which is mainly the officials, state officials and judiciary and the bureaucracies mainly. And of course, a political setup because they need to get to the state legislature, etc. And the protests ran for several days and thousands came out. And it was incredible to see the fact that people were actually paying attention to the details. And it forced the government to backtrack about a decade ago, and all sorts of cultural and artistic representation. One of that you can see on the top right. So the state can step back. State can be made to step back when ideas like this are promoted for no particular reason, but to ensure that those who are privileged will continue to be privileged, leaving the rest of us as bystanders. And next one, please. And in a similar way, we also have the elevated corridor, which is a case where, if you can see the map of Bangalore, it was supposed to crisscross the city in addition to the metro. It doesn't show the other infrastructure that has been built, which is mostly, metro is mostly elevated. This would also come up there. And so the idea was, I mean, if you look at the representation, the visual representation of it done by AECOM, which is an American company, there is no pedestrian there. There is no street vendor. There is no busyness and the type of liveliness of Indian city that you see. It's dead boring cars and buses. And in many ways, it represents Los Angeles in India. You know, Los Angeles in Bangalore, for instance. So this was how it was presented. 120 kilometers of elevated corridor will crisscross the city and save us from congestion. Now, the very idea of congestion, and I'm sure Paul will talk a bit about it, and what it does to a city. I mean, there are many good things that can come out of congestion, and if you channelize that properly. But here, there is a resistance to engaging with the public by and large. And when protests were there, there was police action, there was resistance against, people were beaten back in many parts when they questioned it. And so we actually had to take it up in the National Green Tribunal, and that case is pending there for 4 years now. We recently heard that the government of Karnataka is not keen on building it. I mean, if it was to be built in Indian rupee terms, it would have cost something like the range of, at least the estimates then I recall, 60 to 70,000 crores. So one big problem that we always have with, using the idea of mobility in promoting mega infrastructure is the fact that it is always the motor car that is promoted. It is not really mobility of everyone. It is not inclusive, and yet everybody pays for it. So when 20 to 25% of the population benefits, 75% of the population pays for it. And it is not just the population of the city, the entire state of Karnataka's citizenry will pay for it through their taxes. So this is the kind of model which brings us to pay attention to how the cities are shaped, because transport is one major factor. I mean, there's energy, there's material, there is also the choice and so on that we need to pay very, very careful attention. And then the implications of it, noise, air pollution, destruction of greenery, destruction of livelihoods and properties and so on. Yeah, next one, please. Yeah, Bhargavi.
Leo, can you kindly take it up?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the peripheral road is also another such project where now, as Bhargavi said, we have somewhat of a, if you see the inner circle of Bangalore map, which you see here, there is some sort of a inner ring road, as they used to call it, recently renamed after matinee idol who died of a cardiac arrest last year. And but there is a proposal to build a peripheral road, and then there is an outer, one, and so on. So if you put all the roads together, many circles around the city. So Bangalore's population now is about 14 million, and it is according to the planning authorities, which continue to be the parastatal Bangalore Development Authority, quite in contrast to the, and quite in, I would say, contradiction to the Constitutional 74th Amendment Nagarpalika Act, which requires it has to be done by a Metropolitan Planning Committee, which has got majority people's representatives. So the idea there is that people's aspiration is reflected through this planning authority, which in turn is dovetailed on ward level and panchayat level detailing, which of course has been sidestepped by every government since 1992. And in this place, we continue to have the Bangalore Development Authority, which is a parastatal, therefore no democratic accountability, accountability largely to the cabinet. And the peripheral road is one of its projects. Again, a huge sum of money. I think this is from Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. You can see the amount in rupees there, but that's an earlier estimate. And farmers have been protesting it, basically on the ground that, India went through an amazing reforms process in the land acquisition laws. The colonial 1894 Land Acquisition Act was given up, and in 2013, we came up with a new law which provides for social impact assessment, environmental impact assessment as part of the planning process, in addition to land use planning. And then an outcome of that is to decide the terms of compensation if a project is really required. Farmers are contesting this project on the ground that instead of following the more progressive 2013 Act, the state government is very conveniently insisting on using the colonial law, even though it is obviously not allowed constitutionally, or its variant, which is the Industrial Area Development Board Act. And oftentimes there have been reckless actions. In one case, of course, we found that using the peripheral road, the communities were targeted were Dalit communities, were the depressed communities, and their houses were smashed. That was last year. And this is when people are just recovering from the pandemic, and many have lost family members, and they have lost their sources of livelihoods and so on. So the inhumaneness of this project was evident last year. And the protests are ongoing now, and this is across the city, and farmers are planning to organize what we call jatas, village to village. Tens of villages will be affected by such infrastructure project. It will basically be a massive divided carriageway with service roads and a lot of, in the same way as the Bangalore-Mysore infrastructure corridor project, with lots of, TDR and floor area ratio conveniences provided to real estate. So it provides another instance of what financialization of land does. That it takes away your relationship with the city. And the idea of mobility is not anymore about actually going from place to place in a nice, comfortable, and non-damaging way. It's about something else. It's about having tolls. It's about financializing even transport. So these are the challenges we are seeing. And the proposed land use plan, which is still going through all sorts of loops now, claims that the city's population will be something in the range of 23 million in about 20 or 30 years' time. So you need to ask bigger questions now. Can we actually have sustainable cities with this type of infrastructure? Yeah, next one. Yeah, Bhargavi, you there?
Leo, can you take it?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I must say that Bhargavi is attending to her mother who is not well. So the tender sure is a model which Bangalore has evolved. And it's essentially a project where the entire planning is devoid of any democratic input. And the planning is to turn the streets which are brought under this particular scheme as termed as world-class streets. So it basically relays the entire infrastructure of the street. And when it is being built, it's quite a mess. You can imagine what it means. So the point is that, if you can see, there'll be bollards, there'll be cycling lanes, there'll be underground cabling, there'll be neatly laid out roads. I mean, nobody disputes the need for that kind of engineering. But a basic question that has been asked is, how is it that the Bangalore City municipality, we call it Brihat Bangalore Mahanagarapalike, can take a large chunk of money from the city's budget and invest in projects? And what has happened over a period of time, over the last 10 years when these projects have been, when tender sure projects have become the main mode of street redevelopment, is that the choice of the street is largely the core areas. And when I say core areas, not the city market or the old Pete area as we call it, but the, where upper class live, where the upwardly mobile people tend to aggregate. It's that kind of investment. Again, basically the question comes up, where is the idea of, does it not create disparities in development? Does it not actually end up creating lumps of investment in areas which have already been invested over the decades? Whereas the rest of the city, look at the state of peri-urban Bangalore, for instance, or any other urban center of India. And you know that almost all the money goes into the center of the city where the rich and famous live, the powerful live, or where the business districts are, that as if the rest of the city doesn't matter. So these are some of the basic questions that have come up. And of course, the loss of greenery has become a very serious problem here. And Bangalore has had extraordinary rains in May, and these are pictures from there. The tender sure roads, which are supposed to be accommodating risks factors of the next 20, 30 years, ended up getting flooded, that people had to be, removed from there with boats. And this has become a phenomenon now. And much of the infrastructure which is supposed to be top class is breaking down already. So it raises serious questions of the lack of democratic input. Now, what we have seen is that there's a larger argument that is coming. Why can't all roads be accessible? Why can't all roads be simple in design, not expensive, but at the same time be accessible and be inclusive, where we have street vendors who give comfort to the street user, build security on the street, not dead spaces, which is sterile and looks very clean, but obviously not an inclusive space. So these are some of the arguments which are almost everywhere now. Yeah. Next one.
Yeah. Thank you. So as part of the smart city projects that are happening across all 100+ cities now, Bangalore is also one of those where we are seeing a whole lot of this area-based development, and Cubbon Park, which is at the center of the city, a heritage park, is seeing a whole lot of redevelopment. And in this redevelopment, everything there is so tokenistic. One of it is again so bizarre because we want to make Cubbon Park accessible to everybody. So in that context, a whole lot of investment has gone into investing on the tactile tiles. But the details of how the tactile tiles are laid are again not as per any guideline, any handbook. They've just probably, the mason was laying it as mistaken it to be a design tile or something. It's just random here and there. There is no method to the madness in which these tactile tiles have been laid. There is so much discontinuity. There is probably lack of understanding of how every tactile tile communicates a particular message to those who are using that. So in places where it is nearing a road or nearing obstruction, there are hardly any tactile tiles. So that is how the redevelopment of Cubbon Park is taking place. Another project is the accessibility park, which has actually come from a CSR fund. Even that seems to be like a little school level project work, where a child makes a little model of how an accessibility park has to be. It is largely like that, with such bizarre colors, which doesn't blend into the beautiful Cubbon Park surroundings. So this is how the smart city projects are done. And even in Shivajinagar, which was supposed to see the redevelopment of the Shivajinagar bus terminal itself, there are the project is not yet complete, and it has resulted in one tunnel, which is supposed to be like an underground passage. The Smart City website of Bangalore shows it as a very fancy underground tunnel where people can, like a subway where people can walk through. But when you actually go see that today, it is filled with garbage. It is not open on the other end. It is being used more like a toilet. So this is how money is being wasted when it comes to smart city projects. And we've also seen the smart city projects of Tumkur, where in Tumkur also a beautiful lake has been destroyed. And this lake has been destroyed against the High Court of Karnataka's final order, which came one into 2012 and more recently in 2021. None of the provisions of those orders are complied with. The no development zone of the lake has seen a lot of development by pouring cement and steel and glass. And bus stands have been supposed to be, given a facelift, but even the facelift of the bus stations are not really up to the mark. It doesn't really serve any purpose. A lot of technology is being poured into these smart city projects of CCTV cameras and so on and so forth, but how much of it is really securing safety and security of women, children, is something that we all need to understand. And the way the smart city projects came up also is something that has been largely studied by a bunch of researchers across the country, and every study is worth studying, where you understand how online surveys were done and passed off as a public hearing. So this is another madness that is taking over our cities, and hopefully will not destroy the last remaining patches of greenery, parks, and some of the heritage structures that still remain. I'll stop there and we could take questions perhaps. Thank you.
I just want to say these are some of the issues that we have been engaged with over the last 2 decades. And we chose to bring it together so that it can provide some sort of a framework in which our distinguished discussants could respond to. I'm sure each and every one of you has actually seen it from your own lived experiences and working experiences. And I'm quite aware of the fact that Mr. Anjum Pervez is from within the system. And much of what we have shared is actually a critical review of how the system functions. Yeah, thank you. So on that note, may I now invite Paul Barter to respond. Paul also has a presentation which he would like to share. I must say that all the introductions to the speakers are also in the chat box, so we're not wasting. I mean, we could have read it out, but it would have taken too much time. We also have people watching us on YouTube and Facebook, and there's a Twitter report that is going on with several of my colleagues working on it. You can just follow the ESG handle at ESG India 1, and you will get the tweet reporting of this ongoing webinar.
Okay, shall I start, Leo?
Yes, please, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here. And I'm going to talk briefly in response to some of the themes that I was aware that you would probably speak about. And you've given me some surprises and also some things that I did expect. So I'll try my best to respond with these prepared remarks. The theme here, well, there are several themes, but one important theme is that Indian cities are going through very rapid change, and we've certainly seen that in your presentation. And decisions made in these years, the recent years and in the few years coming ahead, this is a period of enormous change, and these decisions on urban mobility will have an enormous impact in the long term. This is a particularly pivotal moment for Indian cities, including Bangalore. So cities, if we look at cities like this is Tokyo, the shape of Tokyo was shaped by those periods of very rapid growth in the past. And the legacy of the decisions on urban mobility, infrastructure, and policy are left in the landscape. And this is what we would expect to be also happening in Indian cities, so that in 2050, when we look at the large Indian cities, we'll be able to say decisions made in 2022 made a huge difference, and we can see it there in the landscape. Another theme that was really prominent in what you said was that urban mobility policy is political. It's not just technical, and it's not just a matter of markets. I'm just going to quickly summarize the key points in my talk here. Secondly, because urban mobility is political, it's much preferable to have a vision-based approach rather than the traditional technocratic approach to transport planning. And then we need to be aware of our situation. It's very important for decision makers and the citizens in India to understand what kind of situation you're in order to have a clear vision of what's feasible for the future and what is reasonable for the future. So I'll explain more about that shortly. And one of the key points is that Indian cities are still quite high density. They're not high rise, but they are high density. And so space efficient mobility is a really strong imperative. And therefore, it's wise to be looking for examples that are relevant to Indian cities. And those examples are the other cities around the world that have successfully navigated a similar situation in the past or the recent past. And I'll give some examples of that. So urban mobility planning is political. It's not just a technical thing. It's not just a matter of expertise. It's not just something that can be left to the market. And there's been a little bit of a malady in urban transport planning, whereby traffic engineers, experts of various kinds, transport economists have tended to very often portray the decisions as purely technical. There is no choice. We've done our analysis, and really this is what you have to do. It's not a matter of debate. And that, to be very frank and very blunt, is absolutely false, because all of those technical tools have embedded in them assumptions. And those assumptions are also value-laden. They are political assumptions. So it is entirely valid for civil society organizations like ESG to seek to have an input and to seek to empower the citizens and the community to have an input. And that input is best done at the vision stage, where the whole metropolitan area is going through some kind of strategic planning process, rather than in an ad hoc way in a reaction to particular projects. Which reminds me, your presentation actually reminded me that in theory, the experts and the expertise is deployed in a systematic way in strategic planning. But in practice, very often, there are ad hoc projects proposed by private sector or by politicians. And that's even worse than the purely technocratic decision making. That's the absolute worst kind. And it appears that that's all too common. Even in a city I'm familiar with, Melbourne in Australia, there's unfortunately too much of that. And I see that the same thing is happening in India. So even the very fundamentals of what we want from urban transport should be open to debate. Too often this is taken for granted. So very often people take for granted, it seems obvious to many people, that just moving the traffic cheaply and quickly seems obvious. You see traffic congestion and you think, well, it's obvious we need to widen the roads. Unfortunately, too many politicians think that's obvious, and we've heard that as a problem. But unfortunately, that focus is self-defeating. There's a tendency for the traffic to expand to fill the space that's provided for it. And so with just this reactionary approach, a reactive approach to just accommodating traffic and accommodating parking, we're just running to stand still. And there's no vision there. We're stumbling along into a vision of a car-dependent city, like portrayed here, Los Angeles in the United States, which has been stumbling in that direction for 70, 80 years. Now, a number of cities around the world have a wiser approach where they've taken a decision that their primary focus will be to move people and goods in a space-efficient way. One of the examples is Bogota, portrayed here. I think somebody needs to mute their microphone. We've got some noise in the background. But even better is to think, what is it we actually want? We don't necessarily want to move, although we do often have to move. We want to reach things. We want to reach places. We want to reach people. We want to reach opportunities. So even better than planning for space-efficient movement, which is pretty good, even better is to have wise planning that makes sure the city is organized and well planned so that there is less need for travel. Now, of course, we can't do that to an extreme. We can't put everything in all in one place. There needs to be some travel, and what travel there is should be space efficient. So, as I said, urban transport planning is political. It's entirely legitimate for ESG to try to be involved. And there is some progress being made. So, for example, in Europe, in Korea, and in a number of other places, there is a trend towards a more vision-based approach to urban transport planning rather than this older technocratic approach. And this vision-based approach has as a starting point a process whereby the community asks itself, what do we want for the long-term future of our city? And so the sustainable urban mobility planning process is being promoted in Europe, and there are similar pushes in various other countries. I won't go into the details for a lack of time. Now, remember, Indian cities should be very aware of their current situation. India is a lower middle income country. As a result, the cities that have become very large have tended to become very dense, high population density, but without high rise as of now. So this is in great contrast. Even though you see enormous amounts of traffic in Indian cities, you should not make the mistake of assuming that Indian cities are car dependent. They're not car dependent. This is what a car dependent place looks like, with enormous amounts of space taken up by facilities for cars. But what we find in Indian cities is that these are cities that grew large with mobility dominated by buses, paratransit, the Tongas mentioned before, bicycles, walking. And it's inevitable that the city can't spread out very much. If it becomes a high population, it has to be a high density city. But when many two-wheelers and four-wheelers rapidly come into such a city, you very quickly get a mess. And if that city doesn't yet have any mass transit that is immune from traffic, such as BRTS or metro or urban rail, you get a situation of terrible, terrible traffic jams and awful parking situations. And we can call that traffic saturation. So Indian cities are traffic saturated, high density traffic saturated cities, not car dependent cities. And this is really important to understand because it means Indian cities are in a fork in the road of what happens next from this situation of being a traffic saturated city. How do you respond to that challenge? Well, in a way, I've been portraying density as a huge challenge, as a huge threat, but it is also a huge opportunity. Being high density still means that if public transport is provided, high quality public transport that doesn't get stuck in traffic, it can do very, very well in a high density city. And the need for spatially efficient modes of transport is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. That spatially efficient modes of transport, they can do very, very well. But it's a huge mistake to try to accommodate the least spatially efficient mode of transport, which is the private car. Given that Indian cities remain high density, and in the future, as Indian cities get wealthier, they'll probably spread out a little bit and get a little lower density, but it would be a mistake for them to sprawl out like American cities. So it would be wise to look to other relatively dense cities and see how they've handled the situation. And those cities, by taming the motor car, making sure that cars don't dominate all of the space, can actually have a very livable environment, a livable city, but with high density. So which cities should you look to, and what have those cities by and large done in response to this problem of traffic saturation? Well, it varies a lot, but there are some common themes that a number of the most successful cities have tended to not try to accommodate cars too much. Now, not all of them accommodate cars to some extent, but there's a tendency in the most successful cities to treat cars as a luxury, not as a necessity. Now, always middle-class people will say, I need my car, I have no choice, I need a car. Cities that are most successful say, no, you don't need a car, we're going to try to make sure that the alternatives are better. If you do really want a car, yes, you can have one, but you have to pay the price. And of course, a key thing is to invest in the most space-efficient mode of transport, which is public transport, or the various modes that make up this family of public transport. And it's not just about metro, although in many cities, metro is part of the story, but it's investments paying attention to cost. It's really important to not invest in public transport that is too costly. So one problem in the United States, what little public transport investment they do, they waste a huge amount of the money because it is very, very expensive. South Korea, Spain, a number of other countries are good models of low-cost metro building, low-cost public transport building. Luckily, India's public transport investment is relatively low-cost for now, and try to keep it that way. But it's also about getting the institutions right, and that is especially important for buses. And it's also important to provide spatial priority on the roads, bus lanes, even BRTS, especially important for buses. Urban planning should be in synergy with public transport. And of course, there's a whole bunch of other modes that are complementary to public transport, most especially bicycles. Electric bicycles are becoming a huge opportunity, walking and placemaking, as we've heard from ESG. So which cities to look to? Now, of course, there are a lot of low income or lower middle income cities that are in a similar situation to the Indian cities. But what about some cities that are a little further along the process of wealth and of transport development? There are some that have done reasonably well. I've highlighted in blue some that are worth a look. Now, none of them are perfect, but all of them have done some things that are worthy of emulation. And I'll just mention a few. Singapore, where I live, is not perfect by any means. It's certainly not a model of involving civil society in decision-making, but it is a model for being very hard-headed and tough-minded about the challenges that they've faced and being willing to face up to the reality that space is very precious and that they need to be space efficient. And so cars have been treated as a luxury ever since 1974. Public transport has been transformed. One thing that people misunderstand about Singapore, where you see this lovely metro that we've got in Singapore, and they assume that cars were only made expensive because we had a metro. No, the metro only was started, it only opened in 1987, more than 10 years after the first efforts to make cars expensive and to keep traffic under control. Of course, 50 years of transit-oriented planning was very important. And Singapore perhaps was not a model of these other walkability and bicycle and placemaking, but gradually we're catching up on those things. A more democratic and more civil society-minded place, Taipei, has also done quite well. Again, not perfect, there's all sorts of problems, but they have given priority to buses on the road ever since the mid-1970s. Metro came a little later, much like Singapore. They have high density planning, so there's a compact city. And they have eventually managed to build a rather large metro system at reasonable cost when they could afford it. They didn't do it too early when it was would have been a challenge. When it was only a middle income city, they didn't do it, but once it became rich, they invested in metro. I should mention Seoul, which also is an interesting situation. Many of the best things that Seoul has done have been since it made its democratic transition in the 1990s. I should end just with a summary. These are the key points that I made. Urban mobility is political, especially in framing a vision, and a vision-based approach to urban mobility planning is really important. And in that vision-based approach, it's important to understand where you are. So Indian cities are currently not yet car dependent. That's good. What they are is they tend to be traffic saturated. Lots of space being clogged up by cars and motorcycles. So there's a huge opportunity now to make decisions that can create a future that matches the vision of India's urban communities for a more livable future. So I better stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for a really interesting, engaging, and global perspective that you have brought to us. And you know, the type of detailing that you have done really enriches this conversation. I would like to invite Dr. Geetam Tiwari now. Would you please unmute and yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been.
Know that you just traveled back, so thank you for joining us.
No, that's fine. That travel, I mean, with all the other things I've already forgotten I was traveling. Anyway, this has been today's, the presentation, ESG's presentation has been very interesting and very engaging. And it's kind of going down the memory lane. And what Bangalore, what ESG has been doing in Bangalore, I think we have similar stories probably coming out from many other cities. At least I can think of Delhi, Pune, probably we have similar groups who are working on these issues. So I first want to just, kind of reflect upon what are the common themes that I could gather from the kind of projects which were shown today. And one thing came out very strongly that which Leo, you also repeated a few times, that the whole process of deciding how these projects are done and what is included in the project. whether it's metro rail alignment or whether it is alignment of expressway and design of expressway, this complete or to a very large extent, lack of transparency, lack of engaging or very poor methods of engaging with citizens and people, and lack of, I would say, to a large extent, democratic processes. And many of the processes exist on paper, but somehow we are not able to, not only in Bangalore, but many other places also, the processes are being violated continuously. So this is an emerging theme. It is not about lack of resources. I would say it is also not about lack of knowledge of what could be done. And so what is happening? I mean, in our whole process, we are a democracy. And how is it that the concerns of minority in some senses, the car owners, but however, a bigger concern is also about the other beneficiaries. So transport projects, instead of becoming a solution to solving the mobility problem, are more becoming construction projects, where the beneficiaries are not people who are going to use the system or who are their mobility will be enhanced, but the beneficiaries are the construction industry. And the other industry which is involved may be real estate industry. So what is happening in our process that we are losing the mobility concerns to someone else? Let's reflect upon that. And I think we have to together come out with a solution actually addressing that. So second theme that I want to touch upon, something that Paul has mentioned, that Indian cities are different. At the moment, they are not car dependent. Also, the way our socioeconomic projections are, for next 30 years, we will not be car dependent, even in do nothing scenario. A majority of the population would be dependent on other modes of mobility, walking, bicycling, whatever quality of public transport we may have. And our motorization today is also because of two-wheelers, not so much because of cars, which makes it more challenging to introduce a quality public transport system. Because motorized two-wheeler, in terms of space usage, in terms of personal benefits, and in terms of resource consumption, is very, very competitive to public transport. It doesn't get stuck in congestion, even without doing anything. So how do you, if we agree as sustainable transport systems, we know that we have to promote sustainable transport systems, which includes walking, bicycling, and public transport, bus-based, and metro, and I'll come to more details about metro. How do we make this system to compete with the benefits that an individual gets from using a motorized two-wheeler? And fortunately, we do have very compact densities. That is happening a lot of times by violating the plans, but sometimes even in our planning system, we are not promoting, if we strictly look at the guidelines, it is not promoting sprawl or low density cities. So that's a good thing. We have to capitalize on that. High density cities and also very heterogeneous mix of people that live in our cities, both having a very symbiotic relationship between formal and informal systems. We do end up having a majority of the cities have short trip lengths, which again is very conducive for promoting walking, bicycling, and public transport systems. Even in our mega cities like Delhi, if you really look at the trip length distribution, majority of the trips, that would be about 75% of the trips, are less than 10 kilometers in length. About 50% of the trips are less than 5 kilometers in length. So if this is happening in Delhi, all other cities are going to be even shorter trip lengths as compared to Delhi. So it is, in some senses, we do not have sprawling city yet, because the definition of sprawl would be where people are required to travel long distances. from a satellite image, if we see a lot of built up area, that may not be definition of sprawl. So that part also we have to understand carefully and come out with very strong arguments against systems which promote high speed motorized mobility within a city. So I think, first of all, from your examples which have been shared today, I see many interesting lessons which many others Indian cities can look into, because I think you have shared some positive lessons. ESG efforts were able to stall many of the projects which should not have built anyway. So I think we have to really look carefully how we scale up this effort. That's number one. And what I understood, a very intense methods of engaging with people, engaging with different levels of people, and bringing up that bringing it to other stakeholders. So this whole method of engaging with citizens and taking it to the court or other processes which we can make use of probably has given us some benefits. Maybe not 100%, but some benefits certainly. So we have to understand more carefully and replicate these efforts. Second thing, I think another challenge that we have to deal with, which we are dealing, when we start looking at, okay, there are some nice cities in the world, they have done good, and the expanding cities where public transport system was introduced in earlier part of the century, and how cities developed in, I would say, a mature economies. I think one important thing we have to remember, the mature economies, the high income countries, including Japan, when these cities were developing, we did not understand. Globally, there was no understanding of global challenges, of climate change, of the impacts of very high density, vertical densities, investment in those kind of infrastructure. We did not know that in the last century. So today, when we look at how we accommodate Indian population, which is going to double, the urban population is going to double in next by 2030, 2040. We are going to add another urban India. And how we deal with that, we have to really think afresh. And many of the lessons we have to come up with within our own understanding and own small projects and small pilot projects and efforts that have been going on. So I think that is an important thing. And how I want to really project it as, today, if we all are political leaders, many of our political leaders are trying to sell the world-class city vision. Does it have anything to do with Indian city vision? Because when you look at those pictures, whether what's coming out from Hyderabad or what's coming out from Delhi or what's coming out in Kolkata, the whole vision is this sleek, concrete city with high-speed metro rail and high-speed highways crisscrossing. I still don't find our political leaders selling the vision that sometime in future, we want that every citizen, every old person in the city and every child in the city will be safe. When we step out of our home, we will have option to walk safely and bicycle safely by choice to any destination we want. And if it's a longer destination, we should have a vision of availability of quality public transport system. That kind of vision is not becoming the discussion point. So if transport is, there are, of course, it's a political decision, not only a technical decision. Are we failing in selling this kind of vision to our political masters, that this is what we want in future? But this, I see complete missing of this kind of vision and discussion. by our politics, by our other policymakers. That is, I think, a major challenge that we have to address. How do we bring this? And then little details, like when we sell the vision of metro, or when we sell the project of metro, it could well be a very integrated project. How much does it cost to have every kilometer, let's say, the approach to metro system to make it pedestrian and bicycle friendly? Fraction of a cost. That is not happening. Many policy documents have been done, many guidelines have been done, but we are still not translating that on ground. So I think we have to relook at our effort as civil society groups, as academics, and really think about it, that how we bring about these details and these the vision of 21st century inclusive sustainable city into the main discourse of world-class city or development paradigm. I think that is where we have to put in all our efforts together. And it's a huge challenge. Absolutely, it's a huge challenge. There is no doubt about it. And because the more and more development projects, I think at present, the whole sustainable development agenda has been hijacked by technology and by making bankable projects. It is not about creating sustainable mobility. So let us put our heads together and come out with that. I think today we have only a few minutes to reflect upon what you have shared. And I find it very, actually, I see a positive message in many of those projects. And I would really like to pick up those trends and how to scale up those efforts, finally to convert it into this, I would say, not world-class, Indian, sustainable Indian 21st century city. So let me stop here and let's see if we can have opportunity to discuss more points.
Thank you, Geetam. I think you have really emphasized so vividly and clearly the importance of a sovereign urbanism, something that is homegrown, built from the ground up, and speaks to the future, but in ways which are distinctively responding to our own sense of, being in a city and our own sense of urban settlement, and integrated with the type of rural landscapes, which is very distinctive. And not something that is going to bear down so heavily on rural landscape that will dismember it. So I hope that can happen sooner than later, and certainly, hopefully, we'll find political leaders everywhere who are willing to echo that, quite in contrast to what they're now promoting. So I guess to look at the world-class phenomenon, world-class city phenomenon itself is a huge challenge. And on that note, I invite Dr. Mohan Rao. I just texted Anjum Pervez, but he didn't respond. So I guess he's probably wants to come last. So I'll invite Dr. Mohan Rao to speak to what all of this means to him. I mean, obviously, coming from a public health perspective, one of the challenges we now have is that a serious problem in Delhi is how air pollution has become a public health crisis. And that's not just limited to Delhi, it's across. It used to be industrial pollution, now it is air pollution due to transport, the motor car in particular. But that's only one part of it. But overall, I think it's also about how do we guarantee healthy cities from the perspective of mobility and infrastructure. So Mohan?
Sir, you are on mute.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry, I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to listen to the fantastic work that you have been doing over the last 2 decades. I am not an expert on urban health, so I'm, in a sense, an unprincely imposter here. But I suspect that Leo wanted me to join in this conversation because I joined the agitation at All Saints Church. Anyway, one thing I think as people should remember is a lesson that I've learned from from a disability right activist who emphasized the fact that we are all temporarily able. And I think this is very, very important because all our cities are constructed for people who are healthy, who are able to walk properly, who do not have disabilities, who do not need to use a wheelchair. And I think that is seriously flawed. Leo mentioned air pollution, of course, and air pollution itself is said to reduce average life expectation by 2 to 4 years in India. Beyond that, we are dealing with both non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases. Now, Leo mentioned the fact that when he was growing up, Bangalore was a city one walked in. I grew up in that Bangalore. I used to get up in the morning in Baswangudi, cycle up to Bowring Institute to play tennis, come rushing back, get ready and walk up to college, National College, and then Bangalore Medical College. And we used to routinely, want to see a film, you walk up to MG Road. But today it is simply not possible to walk. The city is not constructed for people to have ease of access to any kind of exercise. When I came back to Delhi came back to Bangalore after 41 years, my mother characterized Bangalore as a jail city. She said, everybody is sitting at home jailed. They don't even visit each other because the transport is so terrible, the roads are so terrible, you can't walk. Now, what this leads to is one leading cause of the diabetes epidemic we have in our country, as also the hypertension epidemic we have in the country. The fact that we are not walking, not getting fresh air, not getting good food. And of course, all the cancers. But two other things which strike me as important is the very high rates. India has the highest rates of road accidents in the world. And who are the people who are killed in road accidents? These are the poor, these are the people who are walking, and these are the people who are cycling. And I think that this clearly indicates to you what kind of, and these are the people who are not wanted in our cities. You have frequent drives to throw them away, although our cities won't function without them. They're being displaced further and further away. And I think it is important for us to have good public transportation in order to reduce those mortalities and morbidities. Finally, one very important urban problem, which is related to how we imagine our cities, how we manage our waste, is the fact that India has the highest rates of death due to rabies. And we are simply not doing enough to deal with the problem. And that cannot be dealt with when you're not dealing with waste management, when you're not dealing with how your city is constructed, and when you're not dealing with how do you deal with the problem of rabid dogs. The question of urbanization can only be linked to how we look at the rural sector. Are we doing enough to strengthen sustainable agriculture in the rural areas? Are we investing enough in agriculture? I think without that, what you have is a push factor which is working in the rural areas, driving more and more people away from rural areas, from agriculture into the precariat, people who are hanging on and who we saw during the COVID pandemic, the state was unwilling to do anything for them. They were treated like termites. Our home minister referred to some people as termites. This is how they were treated. They were sprayed with insecticides. They were beaten by policemen. They were run over by vehicles. They had no food, they had no water, they had no refuge in the cities. This is not the kind of future we should even be looking at. And I think I will stop there, Leo. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to listen to such a wonderful panel. One final thing I'd like to say is that a long time back, I'd read an excellent essay on the growth of Bangalore and the politics of Bangalore by Raghu Karnad. And he had mentioned how the construction industry and the liquor industry were two of the primary shapers of the city. And I think today we might add the real estate industry. These are three sectors which are benefiting, and they stand to gain a lot from what is going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohan. And I must say that I see Carol is listening in, and Carol, along with Michael Goldman, worked on the Great Transformation Project. We were also in some ways part of that. When we looked at how the expansion of the city, the speculative urbanism, the financialization is actually creating ghost towns within the city. And I recall what Geetam said, that we are still not as bad as the American cities, which Paul has cautioned against. But we probably are getting there if you look at what's happening in the northern part of Bangalore, near the airport, where gated community living is the mode of, living that is being promoted by the state. And will that end up making Bangalore like Los Angeles? And do we even have an economy to support the city now? And I would like to invite Mr. Pervez on the note. While it is true that Bangalore produces about 40% of the state's wealth, is it consuming a larger part than it deserves in terms of its infrastructure? And also how we would want to reflect on some, all the interventions that have come in so far. Thank you. Mr. Pervez.
Very good evening, Saldanha sir and Bhargavi Rao. And your presentation was fantastic. In fact, in your presentation, I can say that in 6-7 slides, you covered all the important infrastructure project of Bangalore and a different perspective of that project. And then our eminent panelists, they have all added to as far as the urban planning is concerned and the urban systems. Now, there are so many things to speak, and I'm really not very sure that from where to start. So I will start with that, how we reached to this situation. That's the most important thing. And when we have reached to this situation, what are the solutions which are available with us? That can be a long-term solution or that can be a short-term solution. Now, as far as I remember, I am in the service for the last 25 years. And in the beginning of my service, nobody was talking about the urban area. And urbanization was a word which was missing from any of our conferences. And that's the most unfortunate thing which happened to our country. And because of that, not only the city of Bangalore is suffering, but many cities like Bangalore, whether you go to Hyderabad, whether you go to Chennai or Bombay, every city is going through this kind of problem. And we miserably failed on one assumption which we made in the beginning after the independence, that we'll be able to develop the villages in a very, very sustainable model, and we will create enough economic activity in the rural area so that the people will not come to the urban area. That was our basic assumption on which we were working. But unfortunately, it did not happen. And over a period of time, the cities, they emerged as the center of economic activity, center of opportunity. So if a person is moving from interior village to city, we have to also see that why he is moving. Is it only because he is getting less income in the city, in the rural villages, or is there something different than that? And I personally feel that it is not only about the income that is less in the rural area, the people's aspiration is increasing, and they are moving to the city for multiple reasons. And one of the reasons is the better education of their children, better job opportunities, better health facilities in the cities. So there are multiple things which is adding to the migration of people from the rural area to urban area. Now, very rightly, Mr. Saldanha was talking about, am I audible? So, as rightly told by Saldanha Saab, that the Bangalore was a very, very small city. And at one point of time, I was told that there was only one Tahsildar in the entire Bangalore city. But today, we have multiple Tahsildars working in the Bangalore city, and still we are not able to handle the situation which we are facing. And if you see the population growth, I think Bangalore is the fastest growing city in the world. And as I remember, our population growth is almost about 4.5 to 4.8% per annum. And that is a kind of population growth which is extremely difficult for any city to handle. Now, another thing which I would like to share here, that as far as the government is concerned, I would very frankly share with all the panelists who are present there that the government intention whenever a project is taken is always the intentions which have been expressed here, that how an urban area should look. But there are multiple factors which plays in the whole process. See, I was in Bangalore in 1996 and 1998, and things were totally different at that point of time. And I visited the outer ring road work at that point of time, and there was hardly any. This Wipro office, it was almost like a jungle in that area, and nobody was going in that area. But it was a kind of a boom of urbanization in Bangalore, and there are 2-3 factors which is contributing to that city, which is the weather condition of this city. That is one important thing. The second, maybe I can say, the law and order situation in the city. So there are multiple factors which is attracting the people, and especially the IT sector has emerged like anything in our country, and we are reaping the benefit of that also. Now, coming to the urban mobility, that whenever we travel on the road, and when we see the kind of traffic which has come on the road, it is really frustrating. It's really frustrating because I also travel from my house to double road, which is which should not take more than 20-25 minutes, but it takes almost about an hour or so, and a lot of time is being wasted in this travel time. Now, when we come to the solution, as we know that Bangalore at one point of time was running on bicycles and bullock cart, and at that point of time, the Mysore Maharaja introduced the bus transport system in the city, the BMTC, and it has a long history of development going on and going on. But the bus system itself cannot take care of all the requirement of an urban mobility. So when we talk about the urban mobility, it is not only about the congestion on the roads, it's also about the what kind of pollution that we are creating in the city because of the movement of the vehicles. And I think that was one of the major factor, and the time taken in travel by road was a major factor that in early 2000, the whole concept of metro came, and it is growing day by day. And I would like to share that by 2031, we'll have a network of 371 kilometer, 317 kilometer of network will be in the city of Bangalore. And probably at that point of time, we'll see the magic of metro, that how the metro is going to change the entire mobility pattern. Because if I remember, when the first metro line was started from Bayapanali to MG Road, the total stretch was about 7 to 8 kilometers, and it was of no use because you have to get down at MG Road and again go back to the normal activity. So the simple phenomena is that the more and more metro network is added, and if you can provide a seamless mobility of the people in the city for all kind of activity, whether they want to go to their offices, whether they want to go to hospital or meet their relatives and all those things. They will definitely prefer, and as of now, I can see that wherever the metro is available, metro is definitely the first choice of the people. Now, you raised a very important issue in your presentation, and that was the presentation that metro is not for the common people. And that is one point on which I differ. And I can tell you that today in the metro, most of the people who are traveling in the metro are lower middle class, or I can say the poor people who are traveling in the metro. What is the reason? I will also share with you that my fare of Bangalore metro is almost equal to the non-AC buses of BMTC. And people may be surprised to know that thing. And it is actually the fact, like my maximum fare is just 60 rupees. And today, in 60 rupees, you can travel from Bayappanhalli to Kengeri, which is almost about 35-40 kilometers. So people are coming to metro. There's no second thought about it. But what is happening in Bangalore, which is my experience, that if you take the graph of the number of people taking the buses in Bangalore, it is coming down. It is coming down. At one point of time, the BMTC, well, I was MD BMTC also, so I know about BMTC also. And at one point of time, the total ridership of BMTC was almost about 42 to 45 lakh kind of thing. And there is a reduction of almost about 4.5 to 5 lakh. And where these people have gone, and this entire, if you plot the graph of metro ridership growth, it's perfectly inverse graph of the fall in the footfall of BMTC. So the unfortunate part here is that, in spite of adding a faster mode of communication, what is happening that the people are shifting from the buses to the metro. But the new people are not getting added either to the buses or to the metro. And that's the biggest challenge, that how we are going to handle that. Now, we have to go slightly deeper in the economy of the public transport. I'll just give an example that maybe India is one of the rare countries where we have a system of so-called non-AC buses and the air-conditioned buses. Otherwise, if you go to any European countries, a public bus is an air-conditioned bus. Now, what is happening that the group which is moving on the two-wheeler or say four-wheeler, they are not ready to travel in a non-air-conditioned BMTC bus. That is the fact of the life, and I have seen it. Now, what they want an air-conditioned bus. But the unfortunate part is that the Volvo buses which are running in Bangalore, their charges are so costly that 4 people traveling in a car is much cheaper than traveling in a Volvo bus. And that is the reason the people are very hesitant in moving from the two-wheeler or the four-wheeler to the buses. So one thing is that we have to heavily subsidize. I actually agree with you that here is the role of the government, that if you have a kitty of fund, where you are going to spend it. And my own feeling, and many of us in the system, we feel that if we can subsidize the air-conditioned buses in Bangalore city, so a lot of people will start moving to the BMTC buses, and they will use the two-wheeler, because the person who is traveling on two-wheeler, he also is aware that the accidents which are happening of the two-wheeler and these things. Now, on this line, the government is very seriously thinking. As of now, I can share with you that how to subsidize the bus travel in the city. Now, another very important thing is that when we talk about the urban mobility, definitely it is not one mode of mobility which is going to solve the problem. So many people can argue that, yes, we should focus more on cycling, we should focus more on walkability. Some people will say that we should focus on bus services. There are people who focus on the metro, that let us expand metro more and more. But these are all mode of communication, mode of mobility, which are complementary to each other. So we have to see all these mode of transportation in the totality, that how these are going to assist each other. And I'm very happy to share with all the panelists that we have signed an MOU with BMTC, the BMRCL as well as the BMTC, that how the mode of operation of the BMTC routes and all those things has to be modified. And this is the time, because in the next 4 years, the total metro network is going to be about 178 kilometers. And once we reach 178 kilometers, the people traveling in the buses is going to come down drastically. Like I'll just give you an example of the new line, which is going to start from the Whitefield to Bayappanhalli, which is almost about 17, 18 kilometers. Hopefully it should be open by the end of this year, or maybe January or February next year. And all the buses which are flying on the Whitefield to Kempegowda, that is going to be hit badly, because people from the Whitefield, they can come to Bayappanhalli, they can go to Majestic in a half of the time which is taking the buses. So I'm always telling the BMTC that this is the time when the lot of thought process has to go into it and see that how the whole operation of buses can be done so that they are complementing to each other. And a lot of studies have been done. In fact, WRI has done a lot of studies that how the metro and the bus service, including the, I fully agree with you that there has to be provided a space for the people who want to do the cycling or want to use the cycle. So all these things has to come on a single platform. Now, another very important thing which I would like to share, which has not happened in our Bangalore city, I don't know what is the reason for that, is the shared taxi concept. So if you go to any other major city, if you go to New York City, the agencies like Ola and Uber, they pick up multiple passengers. And if you start picking the multiple passengers, you can understand how it is going to reduce the number of commercial vehicles on the road. But I don't know what is the reason that in the state of Karnataka, we is still not ready for sharing of the this Ola and Uber services. Secondly, if you come to the Singapore model, like if the Singapore has reduced the number of vehicles on the road, a lot of regulatory measures have been taken, but we are not ready to take up those things. Like, for example, allowing or putting some additional cost to the cities which are entering into the cost on the vehicles which are entering into the business district, those kind of things, restricting the time of the travel and all those things. So those are the regulatory things which has to be brought into picture, and but it needs a lot of strong political will as well as the support of the people. Then only will be able to think about it. Now, we were talking about the urban planning. Like if you see from the urban planning perspective, also there are multiple view on that we should go for the transit-oriented development, which we are focusing in the government of Karnataka. The Bangalore city, the TOD policy is almost ready, and it may come at any point of time. But there are many people who suggest that why you are going for this kind of model, why don't you go vertical in Bangalore itself? But it has to be a combination of different things. Now, as we go in Bangalore, there are area which is high rise, but there are area which is flat, and there is a need of redevelopment of the city. Now, we were talking about the benefit to the real estate or the benefit to the contractor or benefit to some other people. But we also have to keep in mind that these are the activities which are the engine of growth in the urban area. If you today see that the kind of activity the real estate which is doing in Bangalore city, that is the one of the biggest job provider in the city. But the whole thing is that whether we want to go horizontal or whether we want to go vertical. That is the issue which we have to decide. But it's not only about the residential areas. It's also about the other infrastructure which has to be provided in the city. For example, water supply. Now, I'm living in a area that's Dollars Colony in the RMB extension. Now, I'm here for the last 10 years, and I'm seeing that every year independent houses are being broken, and we are having ground plus 3-story flats. So that means a house which was having only one family, the same space is going to have 6 families and 8 families. Now, whether our existing infrastructure is able to handle that kind of load. So that also we have to keep on in mind from the urban perspective. And one thing which we missing in Bangalore and most of the cities in India is that we have never thought about doing an urban planning along with the urban mobility planning. And as Saldanha Saab, you know that for so many years, we are still not able to finalize the master plan of Bangalore, the master plan of 2041. And as somebody told that the urban planning or the urban transport is having a lot of political angle in that also. So we cannot deny that factor. Those factors are there. The political peoples are there. The very rich peoples are there. Strong people are there. So those things are happening. But we have to appreciate one thing that about the city of Bangalore and government of Karnataka, that our standing in the country as far as the urbanization is concerned, as far as the urban initiatives are concerned, it's on a much higher scale than the other cities. And very soon we are going to see a different Bangalore. I'll just give an example of Central Silk Board, where my metro work is going. Now, maybe that after 5-6 years, you will not see the kind of traffic jam which you see in the Central Silk Board at this point of time. You will not have even 30% of that traffic which you are seeing. So I can tell you that yes, the mobility is, there is politics involved, but it's mostly about the engineering. That is what I have seen, and that is my my experience is there. Now, coming back, you raised a very important issue about peripheral ring road, whether we should have the peripheral ring road or not, at what cost we should have. But if you don't have the ring road, then every vehicle comes to Vidhan Soda or Vikas Soda, and from there it has to go to the other part of the city. So ring road is an integral part of the urban mobility planning. There is no second thought about it. And if we cannot stop the migration to Bangalore city, which we have miserably failed, and I'm pretty sure that in the next 20-30 years also will not be able to stop people from coming to Bangalore, unless we have a kind of system which the China follows, that you have to take a permit to come and settle in an urban area, which is not going to happen in our democratic country. Then we have to think about opening up more and more land for the settlement. So that is also extremely important. Now, what is the model that we are going to do for the peripheral ring road? There can be multiple models. There are models in which it's a win-win situation. It's a win-win situation for the people or the farmers who are owning the land there, as well as the people who are going to travel on that road. And I think the government of Karnataka is very much thinking on that line, You raised one more issue of All Saints Church. Really thank you. I'm really thankful to you. In fact, it was not my effort which contributed to solving the whole issue or giving relief to the people. It was the positive mindedness with which you people came to us, and we have an open discussion. And I fully agree with you on one point, that as far as the quantum of consultation is concerned in our urban planning, definitely it is missing. Nobody can deny about it. We have talked about the ward sabha and those kind of things, but mostly it is on the paper. It has not started practically, and there are because of the political system, there are problems on that. I don't know how we are going to solve that problem. Maybe in future the people will become more and more aware of their rights and the responsibility, and then maybe that we can start solving that the problem. So that thing is missing. But as and when the issue comes, a particular issue like what we have faced, you faced rather in the All Saints Church, we are always open for discussion. Now, approach differs. So it's a give and take policy, which we did in the case of All Saints Church, and it was a very simple thing. Like for me, it was only a change in the technology of the air conditioning. And I fully agree with you that my people were not so open to discuss those issues. And when the many people from your All Saints Church committee also started giving us idea that what has happened in Delhi, what has happened in Ashram metro station and those things, we started thinking on that line, that do we need this much of the length of the stations? Can we manage with a slightly smaller length of the station? And then how that's how we found out the solution, and the work started there. We have faced many similar kind of problem in Bangalore while implementing the metro. And I can tell you, I am working as MD Metro for the last 1 year. And my personal view is that there is no problem as such for which there is no solution. There is a solution for every problem, provided we are also ready to listen to the people. Am I taking too much of time? So the one thing is that definitely the government, and especially the government officials, as well as the politicians, we have to be more responsive to the need of the people. At least a particular issue is coming, we should be with the open heart, we should go to the discussion table and find out how the solution can be found. I have handled multiple situations. Like I can tell you that in the metro implementation, the nice road crossing was one issue which was pending for a very long time, for which we were not able to complete the metro project. All those issues have been sorted out. So openness should be there. Our mind should not be closed, and we should open for the solution for that thing. Now, another problem which the city is facing right now is the multiple agencies which are working. And that has happened as an ad hoc solution to handle the urban problems. So like when Bangalore started growing, we started Bangalore Development Authority. Then we felt that, no, we should have a separate agency for water supply. So we created BWSSB. Then we created BESCOM. Then we, multiple agencies, BMRCL, and so many agencies are working, but they are not working in coordination. I can tell you with guarantee, because I'm also facing the similar kind of thing. But bringing a common platform is also extremely difficult. So for example, the BMLT, the Bangalore Metro Land Transport Authority, there are so many players who are not ready to come on a single platform. It's a kind of silo, which is a historical silo which has been created. And to break that silo, it needs a totally different approach from the planning side also, from the civil society also, and from the government side also. But one positive thing is that it is happening. The pace is slow, no doubt about it. The pace is slow, but at some point of time, the things are going to change. Like for example, this Tiwari itself, if it comes through, there will be a heavy densification of the metro corridor. And that is what we want, that more and more people should travel by the metro, not to make the metro profitable or anything, but it will bring the number of motorized vehicles on the road drastically. And there are 2-3 things which I will share with, want to share with you. First thing is that the mixed development is extremely important for the city. So somebody was mentioning, very rightly mentioning, that for what we are traveling and why a person should travel, say 20 kilometers. Madam was telling that it's about 10 to 12 kilometers a person is traveling, but even that is too long a distance to travel for a person every day. So why can't we bring the workplace near to the residents? And we have to move to a mixed development kind of thing, which has not happened in Bangalore city to the extent which is required. Now that many developers are coming forward and they are coming with a complex where the people are also staying and the workplace is also happening there. But one thing which I would like to share with you, that what Bangalore Metro is doing. Now, Bangalore Metro, we are in a very, very aggressive way. We are going to all the big companies who are having their establishment on the route of Bangalore Metro, and we are convincing them, and they are also coming forward to take a direct link to their campus from the metro station itself, so that the people who are traveling by metro, they need not come down and walk again on the road or cross the road. From the metro station directly, they can enter to the campus of this. Like for example, Infosys Foundation is a classic example at Electronic City, one station when the Electronic City route will start. A person who is working in the Infosys Foundation, he will not come down. He will straight take the FOB foot over bridge and go to the Infosys Foundation. There are other private initiatives which are happening, like for example, LCTA. LCTA is coming with a concept of a Neo Metro. Neo Metro, that basically nothing but that the buses, 3-4 buses clubbed together. They are planning to run those buses from a metro station to the area in the Electronic City. So what my point is that a lot of other things that we are doing, like for example, creating the enough space for the auto, two-wheelers parking space, and the cycle parking space at the metro stations. So all these mode of communication have to come together if you really want to solve the problem. But one thing which is happening at today, the Bangalore is going multiple problem at this point of time. So if you go into the city, metro work is going on, a smart city work is going on, PWSSB work is going on, Westcom work is going on. So even if you have a 4-lane road, the 2 lane of the road is going in the whole infrastructure which is getting created. And that is creating the present day problem. If you go to the outer ring road, what we are facing, maybe that it will take another 2 to 3 years to solve that problem. Now, coming to one more issue, I will not take much time. Coming to the smart city project, and especially the smart road project which has come, the study suggests that the travel time on that stretch to cross that area, it has come down. And that is the empirical data. So the smart roads have contributed to the movement, because many of people who are sitting here, we are all some or other way associated with the mobility engineering. And we know that if you have even a narrow road, but if it is the width is the same throughout the road, then the traffic movement is much easier and much smoother, rather than having a wider road at one point and then suddenly collapsing, that kind of thing. So that is one thing which has it has been done in the central business district, and it is helping. The other very important thing which has happened as a part of the smart road is that all the utility have been shifted to the footpath. So all these road cuttings which keeps on happening, that is not going to happen. Now the issue is that why we did only in the central business district, whether it can be done in other areas or not. Of course, it should be done in other areas also, but as we know that the finance is the limitation. So when you have limited money, you always feel that where to put that money, where it can bring the maximum impact. And that's the reason that it was done in the central business district. But as a policy, gradually we are moving towards the other part of the city also. And wherever the concrete road is going to come, we are going with the model of the a smart road. That is the model that we are following. So I know there is a lot of conflict, because I always say that in urban area, there are poor people, there are rich people, there is middle class, there are children, there are old age people, and everybody has to be looked into whenever we are talking about the urban planning or urban mobility. I'll just give one more example that how the different people have their own interest in the development of the city. Like, for example, outer ring road, my metro work is going on. And there is a tremendous pressure on me to complete this work as early as possible. The reason is that the road will be free, and the people, the industry, or rather the IT sector, which is on that road, is going to get benefit of the mobility. So they say that, sir, aap raat mein kaam kyun nahi karte? Why you stop the work in the night? Why your people cannot work 24 hours? So we started working 24 hours. And then I started getting call from the residential area nearby. Hey, look, what are you doing? The whole night your rig is producing the sound, and we are going into psychological problem. So this is the kind of different interest group is available in the urban area, or for that matter, any area. And our job as a government servant is that how we can bring a balance between the two issues. And a lot of other issues to talk about, like whenever we talk about the mobility, we should not forget about the environmental impact, the kind of traffic which is having. And I always say that, not because I'm working as MD Metro, but I can always say that this is one mobility which is green. I know that electricity is being consumed and electricity is produced somewhere outside the city and all, but at least as far as the city pollution part is concerned, it is going to reduce drastically. And I only hope that the civil society, the judiciary, the government, the legislatures, we all come on a common platform and try to find out an amicable solution, because we cannot take very strong view on any issue. We should be ready to come forward and hug each other in finding out the solution. That is what I would like to say at the end. And I think we have already exceeded by a time. And if anybody wants to ask any question, I am a very open person, so I don't hide anything. I will be more than happy to share on any project because I have worked in the capacity of Principal Secretary Transport, Principal Secretary Urban Development, Chairman of Bangalore Water Supply, MD of Bangalore Metro, MD of BMTC. So quite a good sphere of the city I have handled. So thank you very much, Saldanha Sahab, and I must appreciate the kind of work ESG is doing. And our relation is much older than the ESG. I think you remember we used to fight sitting in Vidhan Sabha as far as the West policy is concerned. So, but all those fights were very healthy fights, and it resulted in a lot of good things happening in the city. And let us hope that in future also we'll fight, but in a very, very friendly environment. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's a very healthy relationship so many of us have with you, because you're open to contestation, and you're open to disagreements and dissent, and you accommodate it, and you're willing to change. And that's why I wanted to flag the All Saints Church experience, which was an incredibly positive one all around, from what would have been the most destructive impact of the metro. We have turned it into a very constructive outcome. So I think that's a good example of how democratization of public transport can have benefits which are far better and far more inclusive than what a technocratic approach typically would do. And I recall what Paul and Geetam have said about how the construction of transport projects is largely technical and not humane. So to humanize, I think, is extremely critical, which is also what you said in multiple ways. I do have a couple of questions, but I don't want to hold others from asking their questions. I have a couple of questions that have also come up, but I just want you to take it into consideration when you respond a little later. And that is, in all of the anecdotal examples you mentioned, your emphasis has been on attending to the emerging investment, the neo-rich, as one may call it, or the new class of economic generators. But inclusivity is about the diversity of the city. So is the metro's transit development policy largely focused on those who can readily afford the expensive city, and whatever happened to the 15-minute city, for instance, which world over has become a very popular expression of ensuring that most of our life can be organized by not impacting the climate, not stealing from the villages so that we can live in cities. So these are some of the ways in which I can put it together, but I just would like to invite quick responses from Kirti, who is here. Kirti Shah is a very, very old friend and to so many of us, and he is one of those who has conceived this series of webinars. This is the 76th webinar in a series which started 2 years ago. And we are happy to collaborate with INHAF. And also want to share that Dr. Mohan Rao and Dr. Geetam Tiwari had to leave. Geetam had actually traveled internationally and just walked into this webinar, so to say. So we're grateful that they could join us. But we still have Paul with us. And Kirti, would you like to give quick comments, or shall we have Paul respond first?
Kirti is not here.
Oh, he's not here. Paul, are you there? I think he was there. I think he dropped out. His signal is bad.
Yes, I'm here, but it's getting late here in Singapore, so I'm a little tired.
So quick comments, then we will.
Yeah. So no, I guess no further comments. I was very impressed with the very sober and polite way with which you have been disagreeing with each other. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Paul. We have a couple of quick questions, and one is from, I'll just not read out, and because of the lateness of the day. Chitra Vishwanath is an architect, and she has written in, basically saying that why is mixed-use development left to developers and not part of a policy of inclusion in urban planning. That is one. And earlier to that, Vasant Kumar Mysore Mata from Mysore, but he spent a long time in Bangalore, has asked, why is there so little investment in buses compared to metro? But more importantly, even that investment is going into creating real estate, where buses of course don't, I mean, in the BMTC system, the TTMCs are all real estate development. There is no investment in the buses per se. And there are also other comments about how, for instance, the Jainam funds have been, diverted for mega projects and not necessarily projects which are responding to the people's needs. So these are some of the quick points that have come up. Yeah, I would invite you to respond to them, and Kirti is back now, and Kirti could also respond, and then we can close this webinar.
Saldanha sir, the first issue is the mixed use, whether it is only happening from the real development side, or the government is actually thinking about opening up the thing. So it's all part of the urban planning, and at one point of time, the whole thought process in the urban planning was that let us have the residential part in one part of the city, and let us have a commercial part separately. And at one point of time, we were so rigid that we were not allowing even a single commercial activity in the residential area. And but as we discussed, there is no solution other than the mixed use of the area. And if you do the mixed use, then it is going to reduce the requirement of people to move. Now, the government is very much open to this mixed use area, and many rules and circulars are coming into the picture, which is going to permit this thing. But as per the Bangalore city is concerned, everything have been stopped because of the master plan which we have to prepare, and the new master plan which is going to come, that is going to promote more and more mixed use pattern, that you have a residential area also, and the nearby you have offices also, nearby you have a commercial activity, shops and everything. So it is going to come. The only thing is that our master plan is very, very old. This was prepared for 2015, keeping in view the requirement of the city at that point of time. So that is one thing which I can tell you. Now, coming to the TTMC, I don't agree that it has not helped the bus services. In fact, my experience of MD BMTC is that because of the TTMC, a lot of people started moving to the buses, and these TTMC, it has evolved as the nodal point of bus transport system. Now, definitely when I'm investing so much and I have to maintain this kind of mega structure, definitely I have to start some commercial activity there, which is going to happen in metro also, and which is happening at the airport also. So just because certain shops has come there, it does not mean that it has become a real estate kind of thing. But I have seen that the TTMC is one place where at single point you can have buses for multiple estates. Like for example, Shantinagar TTMC. At one point of time, your interstate buses were available only from the Majestic station. But today you go to TTMC, the TTMC are also working as the center for the interstate transportation also. And in fact, it is bringing a good income to BMTC also. So a lot of non-fare box revenue which is coming to the BMTC, it is coming from these TTMC. Now, one issue is that what is the kind of support which the government is providing to BMTC? That is a very important issue, and a lot of discussion is happening on that. In 2012 and 13, I was the managing director of BMTC at that point of time. And at that point of time, I was not getting even a single paisa support from the state of Karnataka or a state of or the government of India. And we had to manage with our own resources. We have to run the buses and we have to do that activity. But unfortunately, in between, the fuel prices started increasing like anything, and it becomes completely unviable. If you ask me today, BMTC on its own, it cannot run. And I'm very happy that nowadays, at least for the last 7 to 9 years, the government of Karnataka is providing budgetary support to BMTC as far as the capital investment is concerned. So if it is a purchase of the buses, they are giving. And but I fully agree with you at this point of time that it is not getting the kind of money which is being pumped into metro. And the simple reason is that right now our metro network is very, very less. We have just 56 kilometers. And we have to go up to not less than 400-kilometer metro in a Bangalore to have a seamless connectivity to the traveler. So that's the only reason that it's a new project which is happening. And as people are told, that's a highly, highly capital intensive project. So like, for example, if I'm going elevated, it cost me almost about 350 to 375 crore per kilometer. But if I'm going underground, it cost me even more than 600, 650 crore per kilometer. And that is the reason we have a mixture of underground and elevated metro station. But now, as a policy, we have taken a decision that wherever we are going from the core city area will go underground. So if you might be seeing that RFIC, which is going through Sivajinagar and all these things. So that is the only reason the metro, as of now, seems that the government is focusing more. But let me tell you that the metro is a much more sustainable model of transport from the finances point of view than bus service. The reason is that the operational cost of metro is much less than the operational cost of buses. Even with just 60 kilometers of network, as of now, I am in operational profit in Bangalore Metro. You'll be surprised to know that. Only during the COVID time, we went into operational losses. I'm not talking about the financial cost. Financial cost is very difficult to get from any public project. If I want to pay the repay the loan, it is not possible. Nowhere in the world it has been done. But as far as the operational part is concerned, BMRCL is going to have operational profit throughout its life. And it is going to increase more and more. I'm happy to share with you that in 2018 and 19, which was a financial year just before the COVID started, we made an operational profit of 54 crore. So it's a very, very self-sustaining model. Right now, it needs support from the government, but once it becomes operational, we don't need any kind of support from the government. In fact, we'll be able to repay many of the loans which have been taken through the government department. So this is the need of the time. And I always say that a metro is the most sustainable way of transport, of course, along with the other mode of transport. So at this point of time, it looks very astonishing that we are getting 10,000 crore, we are getting 30,000 crore. But for example, phase 2, the entire phase 2, we are going to spend 30,000 crore. And this is a project which is going from 2017. We are already in 2022. 5 years is already completed. Now it will take minimum 1.5 to 2 years to complete this thing. Now in a span of 7 years, if you are spending 30,000 crore on the metro, it comes not more than 3,500 crore a year, which is not, it's an investment, but it is not a kind of investment which should be criticized. Similarly, the airport line, which I am going from the Central Silk Road to Airport Road, more than 55 kilometers, but it is costing me only 16,000 crore. And this project is again going to take 4 to 5 years. So on average, the investment is only about 3,000 to 3,500 crore. But it looks big because when the project is announced, it is announced that it's a 20,000 project or a 30,000 crore. But this is a need of the city, and I can tell you that it is going to change the skyline of Bangalore city. And all the kind of traffic mess which we are seeing at this point of time, it is going to come down drastically. But at the same time, I again repeating that we need a lot of regulatory measures, that how many cars you can keep in a family. If you're bringing in the hub of the city, you have to pay taxes for that. All this activity has to be.
I mean, really appreciate you taking so much time to address so many of the questions that have come. Even the participants are saying thanks to you for replying to their questions. Paul Barter had to leave because it's 12 in the night for him. He's in Singapore, but I'm grateful that he could stay that long. He said, I'm really falling off my chair, so please forgive me. So I think what we'll do is we'll not stretch this any further, but we will produce a report of this, and everything that has been shared here will be part of that report. INHAF has done an excellent job of putting it on the website, the recordings, and once the recordings are there, we'll share it. So the idea is to have this conversation so that we can have a much higher level of intelligence input, but it's also based on an inclusivity which doesn't come only from particular sectors, but from all parts of our society. That's the thing. And I would also say that the investment in Bangalore should not be at the cost of the larger region, which is obviously happening now, as it was happening 30 years ago, and hopefully it will not continue to happen. But we don't have time for those conversations. I think that's something that we will do another time in terms of what does metropolitanization cost regionally and also nationally, and whether it is at all a sustainable way of urbanizing. And those are larger questions, and we hope to have that soon. I would like to invite Kirti for some final thoughts, and then we can close. Kirti Shah, are you there? I can see that you're there. You have to unmute and talk. Just a brief closure to this, and then.
Sir, you are on mute.
You're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now you can speak.
Yeah, thank you. I think no. I think I have no final thoughts. I think it's a remarkably good session. I think we had some brilliant presentations, and if I take 5 more minutes, I don't think I would be able to add a lot because I have so much more to say, and therefore I would rather kind of leave it for some other time. So thank you very much, Leo, and thank you very much, Bhargavi ji, for this third of the webinar in this series. Very educative, very thoughtful, and as a matter of fact, very inspiring. As a matter of fact, I was thinking all along while you and Bhargavi ji make a presentation in terms of how effective you are. I think how you use how you essentially have been able to mobilize people to kind of look at issues, how you're able to kind of use the instrumentality of law in order to kind of get things done, and how you have been very effective in terms of making things change, even decision making. So it's been very inspiring, and we learned a great deal. Thank you very much, Geetam Tiwari ji, Paul Barter ji. I think I'm very delighted because Paul is an old friend, and I came across him after a very long time, probably 15-20 years. Thank you, Mohan Rao ji, I think for your very brief but very thoughtful presentation. And Anjum Saab, wonderful. We need government officers like you who will come and share and be open and feel part of this whole process. Thank you once again to my colleagues, Ankisha and Branda. We look forward to your presence and your participation in the next session, which hopefully will be next Thursday if we are ready. Otherwise, I think even if you're delayed, I think we will let you know well in advance. So thank you very much to everyone for this wonderful session, very educative and very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti, and I want to place my appreciation.
Just one thing, Saldanha Saab, this is the longest webinar I have attended.
And I'm most grateful.
so